We're still experiencing some weird audio issues, but we're back in place. Today I wanted to gather just two of my dearest friends, and I wanted to chat about really fatherhood. Jordan here on my right, y'all's left, I suppose. He's been a father for
9 years.
9 years. How long have you been married?
I think this year's 13.
And how about you, Morgan?
We just hit our 10-year anniversary, and Haddon is turning 8 in a few days.
So, some experience in the room, and then I just had my son, 8 months ago or so. So I'm fresh to fatherhood, I suppose, compared to these two titans in the
Titans.
But so this is a little bit selfish. It's kind of for me. I thought it'd be interesting to sit down and just listen to both of y'all and gather wisdom. But then also I know there's a lot of new dads out there, a lot of men who just feel like they don't have community, or maybe they don't feel that they have a representation or anyone speaking into their life. And fatherhood can be lonely. I feel personally very alone in fatherhood. Besides maybe Jordan, who I work with, and Morgan, who's a dear friend, but how often do we connect, really?
Right.
It's
well, and when we do, it's not about father things,
right? And I think we're good at connecting, considering the distance between us, but it's so hard. So I just thought it'd be interesting to sit down and chat with you all and kind of hear different topics and perspectives. And I kind of sent you all that list, but I wanted to start out super, I suppose, in flux almost, and just kind of open the table to y'all and just hear whichever y'all wants to jump in. What do y'all consider, I suppose, the most or the hardest struggle that you've experienced so far? The most difficult thing to balance in fatherhood? And I know you'll probably have to sit on that one for a minute.
I think one thing's like something that works for like one dad doesn't work for another. Even if you're like-minded people, like-minded upbringings, like not everything works for. I mean, even for me as a dad, it may sound good, but in execution, like with my family, it may not work into our flow or my kids' personalities. So, like, of course, I try to take in as much wisdom from other people as I can, and sometimes it just doesn't work, And then you can't get frustrated by that. You just have to figure out your own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good word, man. I think for me, it's been the balance of it. Trying to find, the balance of supporting the family, but also supporting what I feel like God's called me to, just as a man, and where kind of the all these different streams of life, who I want to be, the hobbies I want to have, the kind of husband I want to be, the kind of things I want to do in my free time, and where all that meets to create a healthy lifestyle. I think that's probably been the most difficult. It came to head for me a few years ago at Chick-fil-A, and I just realized just how unhealthy so many things about my life were. I was very dramatically angry over like really simple things, and I began to kind of reveal in my soul that I wasn't finding that sweet spot of where it all came together to create health. And so I really had to get rid of some things in my life, and stop volunteering in some ways and stuff. I mean, I had to really get rid of some stuff in my life to pursue health. And it's still a struggle today. Even I feel like I'm the healthiest I've ever been, physically and mentally and spiritually and emotionally, but it's still a struggle every single day. So that's probably my biggest struggle.
And I feel for me, one of the, I suppose, I don't know what word I would use, but you can never achieve that perfect balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the frustration and annoyance of pursuing excellence or
yeah.
greatness
Yeah.
within yourself and within the life that you want to build is, balance is something that's kind of been just the key of my personal life over the last few months. It's a natural next step for me as I've stepped into this fatherhood, and it's been, how am I going to balance all of this? Plus I have all my other endeavors because I'm so ambitious and I want to, imprint myself on the world around me. And it's just been this struggle constantly of, I'll come home one day and I'll be, man, today was a great day. I mentored people at work. I had some quality conversations with Jordan. I really feel like I was listened to and understood. And then I got home and I spent some quality time with my son, and I played with him on the floor, and then I went into my room and worked on it, and it all was perfect. And then the next day it's just,
it's chaos.
Last night was an interesting one. Strider for the first time, and something I didn't mention in the notes, but I would like to hear just some stories. So maybe as I share mine, y'all can think through just some fun father stories.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to shout out my wife. I was so impressed with her mothering abilities last night and her mother intuition. So Strider actually, he's been, and I say this at the risk of Satan turning against me.
But he's watch your next statement.
Right. So I say this with all humility, I suppose. Please, Lord, I'm not testing you. But he's been such a great night baby.
Yeah.
He just sleeps at night. We put him to bed and he's out. For his first 8 months, I can count on one hand the amount of nights that we've struggled to get him to sleep. Well, last night was one of those 3 or 4 nights, and he was just screaming bloody murder, as you all have experienced.
Yeah.
And it was, no reason. We've diagnosed all the little things, and he's just unhappy. And Julia kind of diagnosed it. She felt like he was having a panic attack, that he was in panic mode. And so she gathers him up, and she just climbs into bed with him, which is something we've never really done before. And she just rocks him for about an hour. And then as I went to her, and I was kind of just popping in and out of the room to check on her, and one of the things she told me at one point, she said, I'm monitoring his breathing, and while he's asleep, his breathing is still a little panicky, so I'm going to allow his breathing to kind of calm to a state where he gets settled, and then I'll be able to set him in the bed. And then perfectly, she timed everything wonderfully. As he was fully out and calmed, she was able to lay him in the bed, climb out, slept like a rock all night.
That's beautiful.
And in my mind, I was just impressed with her patience and her kind of wisdom in that moment.
Yeah.
And I took stock of, how I could learn as a dad. But I just wanted to share that because I thought it was a beautiful moment for her as a mother. And it was kind of a moment where she did something new she'd never done before and analyzed the situation and then made the right call. And I just thought it was great. But it's not particularly a funny story, but it's just one of those, as a father, you resonate with these things. It's like, the struggle. So I would love to hear from y'all, I suppose, something that's funny or amusing, One of the funny ones for me would be Julia sent me this picture of her one day with just poop, like just from her chest all the way down to her leg, and she's just holding the baby out, and it's just, so anything that comes to mind that you think would be.
I think recently I've realized how much my kids have grown and how, like they're, how intelligent they are, and like they're becoming little people, you know what I mean? And we can make jokes, like like the jokes we get to have together, And so recently we were at the dinner table. This is kind of crude for your audience, so I hope they're okay with that. We're sitting at the dinner table.
Streets,
we're like, we're done eating, right? We're just chilling at the table. And, the kids start getting wild after like 5 minutes anyway. They don't want to sit still. And I just leaned over and I just ripped one, and without skipping a beat, Haddon and Lila both looked at me and said, you should never trust a fart. And it's something they've heard from their granddad, and it's become a part of their language. And, they threw it at me. And it's just like, man, I love kids.
Yeah.
The
innocence of a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, so me and Morgan's kids are all about the same age. I feel like every time Danielle was pregnant. Like Taylor just got done being pregnant or was pregnant a few months later. So I can echo that. Like it's crazy to see. My oldest one's 9. The other day she burned my wife like so good with my wife's on this huge like protein kick right now, and she brings it up every single chance she gets. And Nora came in the room and Taylor was talking about some kind of food, and Nora's like, but how much protein does it have in it? And it was just not the funniest thing in the world, but like next level. Like she's starting to get her personality, starting to, really be able to, like you said, communicate back with me. It's not so much one-sided.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the coolest things, is being able to see them grow. And just learn more about them, how they're different than me, how they're different than their mom. But then how many of those things are like hereditary, like nurture versus nature type stuff, that they just get from osmosis, just being around us. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. What would y'all say to, because you've been a dad for some time, and I think there's an epidemic going through our culture of people who are somewhat afraid to have children, or they think that they don't see the value or the beauty in it. And the reality is we highlight the pain of having a child. And I think y'all could relate. Yeah. Like having a child is painful. Yeah. And it's hard and it sucks. But there's so much beauty and meaning and purpose in it. And if you had a public platform such as this and you could speak to kind of anyone out there and encourage them in fatherhood or in parenthood. And I know that's kind of a tall order, and here's just a small tangent before you jump in. Something that I noticed and I think I mentioned this to you, Jordan, but as I was becoming a dad in the months leading up to Strider's birth, all of the comments were, just get ready to say goodbye to your sleep, or, your budget's going to be, just destroyed, and you're going to be poor now, and your life is going to be
just like classic
chaos.
One-liner, like dad jokes.
Yeah.
And there was this one dad, though, this one dad, and I was at an ultimate Frisbee tournament, and he was, oh, you said you have a child coming? And I said, yeah. And he said, man, I love my kids. And then he just turns and he runs down the field.
And I was that one dad.
And I felt so warm in that moment.
Yeah.
And I was just excited, and I was, oh my god, like, oh, I can't wait. And I thought to myself, I want to be that guy who says something meaningful and positive and actually encourages like a future father. Yeah. So what would you all say? Because I know there's, I guess, gather the beauty of it and the meaning of it and share that.
I think for me, I wasn't ready to be a father. Like it wasn't a surprise, but like, I thought I would be completely ready by that time and had my mind around it, what kind of dad I was going to be, the whole, oh, well, I'm never going to do that when I have kids. Like all that stuff was just kind of thrown out the window. Right. But I think the purpose is what really, I guess, seals all of it for me. Like how I feel about it. Like it gives me something else to look forward to in the day, something to go home to, even if my day has been terrible or I've been terrible that day. Like I go home, my kids don't care what my day was like. They don't care what I do for work. They don't care, how much money we have. All they really just want is just me around. Yeah. And it's so pure because like their impression of you is based purely off of like how you interact with them, how you treat them. Like nobody goes and trash talks me to my kids. Like, so they don't have to worry about outside noise. Like they know me as daddy, and that is just their opinion. So that's very nice when in a world where everyone else's opinions matter so much. Like there's those 3 kids, like their opinion is what means the most.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's and it kind of makes me think about, the when Jesus says, we need to come to him like little children. And as you were going through that spiel, what was imprinted on my mind was do I go to other people in that light as a child would, and with that fresh slate, with that clear mind, with that no expectation mindset, just with love and admiration. Yeah. And then do I go to the Father in that way? Or do I expect things of him? Yeah. Do I anticipate how God should act or perform for me? Yeah. Like, you better provide because you're my heavenly Father. But that's not really what your children are thinking. They know that everything is taken care of, and they just love you. And it just makes me reflect on, I guess, my relationship with my heavenly Father, and how many times I'm not just being thankful that everything's taken care of realistically, and just having a pure relationship with him, which is ultimately what he wants, because he even says, "Come to me like a child." He desires just that unselfish, just pure relationship. I thought that was beautiful. Yeah.
I think for me, as I've talked to folks becoming dads, we actually had just 2 folks at our church recently have little ones, and one family, their his son has Down syndrome, and so he had to wrestle through that. That's kind of, for a lot of people, that's hard. And so he and I had some really good conversations, and seeing his humility reminded me of the importance of the family. And this is a bigger kind of meta answer to your question, but that's where my brain goes is, the family is more than just about me and my own gratification, or, I'll have a wife who makes me feel good and who, gives me cuddle time, and, that it's so much bigger than that. Like, when we commit ourselves as men to being fathers, and we go into it and we say, I'm going to be a dad, I'm going to fail, but I'm going to take this responsibility seriously. We're being scooped up into a move. It's almost like this cosmic energy that has been getting moved throughout time since we started having babies. And it's a big deal. We're talking about legacy. We're talking about world building, building communities within your home, that then those are the bricks that build the larger society. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like there is no greater calling than to disciple people. And I think one of the most effective ways to disciple people is to have children and bring them into a home where they're being discipled. Not everybody's going to have kids, and I highly encourage everyone to wrestle with themselves to figure out if they're called to singleness or not. I think singleness needs to be shown and taught as a valid calling, but that doesn't mean that they're not a part of a family in their singleness, because and this is just a tangent. But I think that society, especially traditional U.S. society in the West, has said the family is the most important thing, and I think it is one of the most important things. And when I say family, I mean the nuclear family, the blood family. But I think that in elevating the blood family, we forget that there are orphanages full of kids that have no place to go. We forget that there are women struggling with, do I abort this baby or not? We've talked about that before. I think we've got to see children. We've got to value children more than we do. And I honestly, one of the things that got so under my skin when I was still doing social media heavily back in the day is the things people would post about kids, deriding them or acting like they're lesser than. And it's just like, I couldn't reconcile it with what Jesus, just an example you brought up, I just can't reconcile that with my worldview. We've got to treat children as if they are the past, the present, and the future, all in microcosm, in the body of a 5-year-old, who doesn't know how to regulate emotions, who doesn't know how to not throw. Booker's in a phase right now. He's throws everything. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how many times I tell him not to, but it's like, there's an impulse within him, right? There's that impulse to rage, that impulse to, and he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know where it's coming from, but he is learning now how to be a man later. And so our children need to be valued a little more than I think they are in our society, and especially with young folks. You know, the TikTok memes and stuff like that, they get under my skin so bad because of the things I say. Anyway, I'll get off that hobby horse.
It's good.
That's beautiful. And something that you said really resonated with me around a lesson that I've been trying to imprint on my mind so deeply, and something that I've been trying to do. And it's such a deep concept, but I think it was Jung who said, I probably got it wrong, but the philosopher, and he said, you have to, in order to understand who you are as a man, you have to gaze into the abyss.
Yeah.
And when you gaze into the abyss, that's a metaphor for understanding what evil you're capable of.
Uh-huh.
But then Jung said, if you gaze too long, you'll lose yourself. And Jordan Peterson actually has a different take on that. And I think I resonate more with his take. And it is, if you gaze into the abyss and you feel like you're about to lose yourself, then you haven't gazed long enough. And his is, you need to look longer. And then in the depths of that absolute despair and drudgery of who you are as a person, there you will find your most broken, vulnerable self, and that's how you can build something meaningful. And there's no value to a man or to a person who isn't capable of violence. So a rabbit, for example, it's harmless, so we don't respect it, because all it does is it gets preyed on, and it gets eaten and then disposed of. But something that is capable of great harm and yet holds itself back, that's beautiful. That's meaningful. That's powerful. So what your son is learning is he's learning he's capable of great harm.
Right.
And
he
now
has
it's
hurt
your
his brother
job
and
to
sister
teach him
before.
to withhold and to control. Such a beautiful thing. And I don't know how to phrase it well because I haven't given it enough thought, but the amount of negative talk online through TikTok, through the memes, around parenthood and around fatherhood and around children, it is not healthy, and they lack understanding of the value of struggle, the value of children, and then the role that this child plays in their life to make them a more valuable person and to give their life meaning that they can't even comprehend. And it's all focused on, well, you're gonna lose sleep and you're gonna make less money, so don't do it. And it's just
well, and on the flip side of that too, there's a complete disregard for the wisdom of the elder. And you see this in Western societies more than you do in like tribal societies, right? Where elders are lifted up as like, there's wisdom here, there's experience here, we should listen, we should maybe humble ourselves, right? And for me, that's one of the values that I have found over the years of putting myself among older, wiser men in the church. Danielle and I were part of an older couple's Bible study for a long time. And when I say older, I mean like 70s. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. There was a young adults class, and I said, I like those folks and I want to hang out with them. I want to invite them over for dinner and I want to study the Bible with them. But what I need in my life is I need guidance from somebody who's walked this walk. I want to be friends with somebody who can look his wife of 50, 60 years on her deathbed and say, I served you well, woman. Now go and die and be with your God. Young people, they don't get that perspective yet. And often it's, it's like the whole like, oh, okay, boomer, they just kind of make fun of older folks. And I don't want to be known as that kind of person. I want to learn from the wisdom of the elder. So, but that's the flip side.
Jordan, his mic's just...
Yeah, we got to flame that off.
Smoke alarm's about to go off in this room. You got to calm down, Mr. Morgan. Give this man a mic, and he just becomes a new being. I
don't
don't
get to
know.
talk
We
as
just
much.
covered a lot of ground, so I wanted
Yeah,
to give
that
you
was a
some
lot.
space to feed in, or I have.
I literally lost myself listeting to him.
You're just.
I forgot where I was, and I was like, man, this is good.
He just turns, looks at the camera, and goes.
Just like ditto.
Cool. Then let's jump into a couple of statistics. 43 to be exact.
Oh, let's do it. I love statistics.
And if y'all turn your attention to the beautiful
Yeah.
camera I have up there, I think it's really interesting. So, and what I figured I would do is I'm just going to kind of read down these. Maybe we'll go through all 43. Maybe we won't.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just kind of stop and dissect the ones we think are interesting. But so there are an estimated 72 million fathers in the United States. So please, if I could get 1% to listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
There are 24.6 million fathers in a married two-person household with kids younger than 18 years of
That's a
age.
lot of dads of young kids.
There are 2 million single fathers in the United States. 17% of all single-parent households are single fathers. Think about that. Only 17%.
Yeah.
I was say that seems very low.
Yeah.
And what a shocking statistic, in my opinion, because it shows if only 17% of single dads have custody of their children, then there's either a real lack of understanding in men around the value of nurturing and fostering and caring for a child, or B, our society is tilted against fathers because we're more
100%.
aggressive.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of where that goes is we tend to lean towards the mother because she's more gentle and she is more nurturing.
Well, and if you look at legislation over the past, even 30, 40 years ago, you'll see that it does skew towards women. Almost like the assumption is the mother will get custody unless there's a drug problem or something like that. And it's sad. And I think it's detrimental to our society at large, but
yeah. So here's the breakdown of a single father's 44% divorced, 33% never married, and 19% separated. So almost 50% of fathers get divorced. 33% of all children, 2.4 million, live in a home without their father. Wow. So that's almost 1/4 of all children live in a household without their father. Wow. Well, very close to it.
That hits, man.
And you think about the importance of a father and mother. And the dynamic between those two is so powerful because it's the mother's job to nurture, to love, to teach the softness, the gentleness of life. And it's the father's job to counteract that and to help balance the struggle and the harshness and the determination and kind of the squaring of one's shoulders in order to face the absolute terror and misery that is life. Yeah. And that's why we have this generation of weak children coming up because almost 50% of them don't even have their fathers present. Yeah. And what that results in is a generation that doesn't know how to face the world and the pain and the suffering and the anguish that is the world. And the problem with mothers, which with all love to them, and mothers deserve, of course, the absolute respect and love and admiration that they get. But the problem is a mother's default mode is to shelter and protect.
Yeah. Oh, and you brought up Jordan Peterson earlier. He talks about the tyrant mother. We often hear about the tyrant father, right? Yeah. But he talks about the idea, the archetype of the tyrant mother, who is that overbearing, domineering, nagging, abusive emotionally, controlling, right? Very dominant in a very different way, who totally emasculates their children and takes away any hint. And this one hit me because God loved my mother, but growing up, she wouldn't let me play with guns. And rightly so, I think, because I had a half brother who shot himself. And so there was some fear there. And so she didn't let me play with guns, but every chance I got, I would build guns out of Legos, sticks, you name it. Because there was a thing in me, like I understood that there was power here. This was a tool against evil. You know, in my world, I was playing army, and I needed a tool against evil. And so Jordan Peterson talks about that idea, how we strip the tools of fighting evil from our children, our boys, especially our young boys. We see any hint of aggression, and then we beat it out of them. You know, we manipulate them into being completely demasculated, and then of course they're going to grow into overly submissive husbands who can't make a decision, who end up divorced, right?
Some of the most overly submissive husbands I know are boys who didn't have their father.
Yeah, that's right.
And they default to their wives in every move because that's how they defaulted to their mother.
Yeah.
And it's so vital for children to see that healthy tension. Healthy, of course, but it's imperative that they see and they balance that. And something that Jordan Peterson calls the mother's crucifix, which is telling the child, away you go into the darkness, to the terrible world.
Yeah.
Because, and something that he says, and every time he says it, it just chills go down my spine. He says, because it's dangerous out there, but it's more dangerous here.
Yeah.
And then when a mother recognizes that it's more dangerous for the child to be under her protection of her wings, because there he'll become small and fragile and weak and incapable of defending himself. When she allows him to go out into the world and learn to defend himself, then that's when a mother kind of transcends. But it's her crucifix, because it is the most painful thing a mother could possibly do or endure. Because all of her base programming says protect, love, nurture. And that's the opposite of that. But it's also what Christ endured on the cross when he said, I'm going to go through the ultimate pain so that I can save you. Yeah. And then that's what a mother's crucifix. She'll go through the ultimate pain of actually allowing her son into the world or her daughter, but it saves them. And then without that crucifix, you're left with a small individual who's incapable of maneuvering the tragedy of life. Well, let's wrap up the podcast on that. So here's some interesting, moving on, I suppose. Social status involving fatherlessness. This percentage of children without a father in the United States is 43%. 90% of runaway and homeless children are from fatherless homes.
Wow.
90%.
I've never heard that statistic before.
The percentage of a rapist with rage that came from a fatherless home is 80%. 80% of rapists with rage come from a fatherless home. Absolutely chilling statistic. And as a meaning mothers, these numbers would terrify me. Because there's so many mothers who don't have the father but want the father.
Yeah.
And the reality is that man probably came from a fatherless household. And he's perpetuating that same, I suppose, statistic and kind of thing that he... So if I was a single mother, these numbers would terrify me. Because it's how do you combat the overwhelming statistic of these. 80% of minors in state facilities are from homes, or 70% of minors in state facilities are with homes without a father. 40% of inmates housed in jails are from homes absent father. And then the rate of abuse and neglect in a single-parent household is 73.3% children per 1,000 versus the rate of abuse and neglect in a two-parent household is 15%. Crazy stuff. And then 71% of all high school dropouts are from fatherless households. And then if a child has a father in the home, they are 40% less likely to repeat a grade. The teenage repeat offender arsonist is 19% more likely to be from an absent father household. Arsonist. So if you're an arsonist, you're 90% more likely to be from a fatherless household. Just insane numbers, and I think
it's very specific.
It is, you know what I mean?
It's a very specific stat that somebody dug out there.
You know, girls are more likely to have children as a teenager if they grow up without a father. Kids who experience fewer behavior issues in school when a father figure is active in their life. Girls develop a stronger math skills when growing up with a father figure. Boys get better grades in school when a father figure is present. absolutely insane. And we could just go down, but
Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants to listen to the other 40. And I can attach this to kind of the description for people anyone wants to look. But the evidence is overwhelming, is what it comes down to. The data, the numbers of the importance of a father. And the problem is our society is, in my opinion, kind of backed away. It's like, well, we don't really necessarily need dads, and we don't necessarily need that family unit. And, you can have, gay marriages, and you can have all these, 2 dads, 2 moms, and sure, whatever. And they do a great job loving their kids. And there's actually statistics to support, that's better than a fatherless household. Mm-hmm. But there's also something to be had for, and something to be said for, that balanced household, because that's why it was originally created, because it brings a perfect balance and a marinade of father versus mother. And when you actually have a household that does that well, how that affects children positively is off the charts.
The last Bible study that I did with the group that we do on Monday or Wednesday mornings, it was on the book Kingdom Man by Tony Evans. Mm-hmm. And the whole book is just around the concept of like how the United States specifically, but the world is demasculating men. Yeah. And it's all about, every time they talk about it in church, like you feel uncomfortable about the submissive wife and all of that. But reading into that, it's about making sure that the father, the husband, is aligned with God. Yeah. And the whole book was talking about how many problems we could fix in society by men just stepping up. Yeah. And so for a female that's in an abusive relationship, something like that, like you don't submit to that husband.
That's right.
In that life, you don't submit to him unless he is aligned with God and what God has for the family. And so they were talking about all these statistics around, how many things in our country could be fixed by men just standing up and being men. And I was talking to my pastor this week, and he threw out a few weeks ago a stat about I think it was adults, or say kids that grow up without their dad going to church with them. 75% of them are likely to never go to church again in their life. Yeah. And like that one hit me like hard. And I started thinking about, of course there was times when, I wasn't in church and I'd miss every few Sundays, like, no big deal. But then I started like thinking about how that affected my kids. Yeah. And like that really bothered me. So I think as I looked into that statistic, it's like, I don't want to be that statistic. I don't want my kids to be that.
Well, and I think too, we often, at least this is something I struggle with, and this is the fallacy that I've believed as a dad that I work through constantly, is that what I teach them primarily comes through what I say to them, when the reality is 95% of what they learn from me, they're going to watch my behavior and they're going to copy what I do.
Oh yeah.
And the reality is I'm not always the best example. You know what I mean? I might talk a good talk, but I don't always walk the walk like I should. Yeah. I don't always treat their mother like I should, and I'm just being real, I don't always treat them like I should. I tend to be, I got kind of a short fuse sometimes. And I've noticed Haddon more and more recently as he's gotten older and older, he kind of checks. He's learned to check based on my response. He'll check what my emotion is. Because I'll respond, without thinking about the look on my face or the tone. And he'll say, "Are you mad?" And he started doing that recently. And it's just, every time he does it, it just wrecks me. Yeah. It's like, no, man, I'm not mad. I'm tired because I hadn't slept in 3 weeks. It's like, it doesn't have anything to do with you. But my point is, they learn through our actions more than they do through our words. And if they don't see us leading our homes, they're not going to have that as an example. If they don't see us dying to ourselves and serving their mother, they're not going to have that as an example. And I grew up with a dad who didn't go to church. It was never on my radar to go to church. Like, that's the last thing I'm doing on a Sunday morning. Yeah. But I didn't have that example. But I was at work early every time, and I worked my butt off every day I went to work, and I was honest at work because that's what he did.
Yeah.
I copied him. He never had to teach me that. I saw what he did and I copied that. So that's been a reminder to myself as I've been figuring out how to be a dad. So
Yeah. And I wanted to, I suppose, encourage you, I guess, in that, because finding that balance and learning to show your son that fighting for balance is pivotal in his life through your actions will actually benefit him tremendously and astronomically. Yeah. Because the problem is we live in the society where really nothing is balanced, and everything's kind of consumed at exponential rates. And when I look around me, I just see a lot of unbalanced people. It's all I do is work, or they're not at work enough and all they do is play, or all they want to do is buy the new most exciting thing, and nothing is kind of cut up and diced up correctly. And something that I don't know why it triggered me a little bit, not in a negative way, but it just triggered like thoughts, was, when you said you hadn't slept for 3 weeks. Therefore, your son thought you were angry. Yeah. And I was like, well, dang, how important is it that you prioritize sleep?
Yeah, that's right.
But then how do you prioritize sleep when life's so demanding? Yeah. But you have to show your son, hey, I prioritize sleep because I understand that it affects me negatively, and therefore that's an important tool so that I can then execute my life exponentially better if I have the correct amount of snooze time. So
well, and I'll say this too. I'm a lot more transparent with my kids than I probably should be at the age they are. Just like I'm way more transparent with my people at church than I probably should be, but that's just how I roll. Like I've got to live like that, or I'm just unhealthy if I don't. And so I'm all the time with him. Like, it has nothing to do with you. Here's why I'm upset right now. Yeah. And I'll give him 3 reasons. And all of them, I'm sure, are just like, I'm like, me and your mama had an argument earlier, and I've got to buy new tires for the truck, and the house is dirty even though I cleaned it yesterday. It's
He's like, oh yeah, I get it.
Okay, Dad, then he gives me a hug, and it's like all of it went over his head. But that's patterning for him, and this is what I tell myself. This is how I justify it. It's patterning for him a lifestyle of being open and honest. And I want him to see that. It's not always about him. He's a kid. He's going to be selfish. He's going to think everything's about him, but it's not about him. And he needs to learn that from me. So,
man, I wanted to jump into some of the topics I sent you all, but when I pulled up on my computer to find our group chat, it's not popping up.
Got it right here.
So I was like, and then I turned off my phone because I didn't want to. I don't understand why it's not either. I'm pissed off. Apple's bested me again. Gosh darn it.
I'm going to stay out of that.
You don't even know how to look at Morgan's phone. What is this?
You probably flick your thumb up on an apple and it goes down, doesn't it?
So that's a really interesting question, I think, that could get us chatting, would be how has fatherhood altered your brain chemistry? And I'll kind of kick it off with I've always been a pacifist, and my view, and Morgan, we've chatted about this extensively, has always been, as a Christian, kind of, we shouldn't indulge in war and in violence and in fighting, and there's no real value or earthly win for us. All of our wins are heavenly, therefore, how does any violence, etc., benefit me? But the other day I was, and you may have heard this one, Jordan, but I pulled into my driveway over here, and I noticed this car driving really slowly down the street, and we live in a small neighborhood, so kind of know most of the cars, and I didn't recognize it. I was like, oh, okay, and it was driving super slow, so I was, okay, strange. So 2 red flags kind of go off, and then as it pulls up to pass our house, it slows down even more. And at this point, I'm leaning into my car, and something that I've always just has been prominent in my mind is how vulnerable you are when you're getting a child out of a car just for attack. And in my mind, I was thinking, are they watching me right now? Like, do they see me bending into my car? Are they analyzing, who is this? What are they doing? Well, the car stops and backs up as I'm pulling the car seat out. And in my mind, I went from pulling my son out of my car to, all right, how do I set this car seat down, and then when this person attacks me, kill them? And that was just a switch, because I was like, I will not allow harm to come to this child.
Yeah.
And it was chilling to me how calm that thought went through my head.
Yeah.
Mechanically, just this child will not have harm come to him, and if this individual intends harm, they're not going to see the end of the day. And then the individual rolls down their window and they're, Charlie, Charlie, and their dog comes running down the street, their runaway dog, and I was, oh my goodness. I'm over here plotting just violence, and they're just looking for their lost dog,
right
you know?
there.
You said, no, dog, don't go to them. They're sketchy.
And I just felt like an idiot, you know? But it was a kind of, it altered my brain chemistry in the way, you know, it was just, you know, harm will not come to this innocent child who is incapable of defending himself. And I'll ensure that. So I suppose that was a moment when I realized like my brain chemistry was just fundamentally changing.
Well, to truly love something that's pure and innocent like that, you've got to be able to have the capacity to protect it.
Yeah. And I think something that Ryan Reynolds says that I didn't understand.
It's the best.
I didn't understand is, you know, he said, I love my wife. And he said, you know, I will use her as a human shield to protect my kids. And that never made really any sense to me until I became a father. And then I was, yeah. Like if that was what it took, like that's what it would take. Yeah. And there would be we would both understand, and vice versa. I hope she would use me as a human shield to protect our son. And it's just crazy how the way you think and the amount of pure unadulterated love that you have is off the charts and is indescribable. But I would love either a story or just an example. It'd be awesome.
I think like what that made me think of is like that fear you have when you wake up in the middle of the night. Like something wakes you up, or you see, like I've heard a car door slam or something, and then like all of a sudden I'm awake, and like I'm a pretty groggy person when I wake up. But like if something like that happens, it's like, okay, like I'm making sure the kids are okay. I'm making sure like no one's getting in this house. Before I go to bed, double checking the doors, all that kind of stuff, and like it's just that protector mode that comes out. Because I think like bigger than like them protecting them behind the shield is them feeling safe and not knowing there's anything to even be worried about. My oldest daughter, 9 years old, she's a worrier. So like she sees a police car come in our neighborhood, she gets super upset. And they came through a few months ago with they did like a Christmas parade with police cars, and it just kind of freaks her out a little bit. So like my big goal is to make her feel safe, and create an environment where like she doesn't even know that there could be harm, because I'm ready to throw down. I'm ready to do what, like you said, whatever it takes, and her no difference for her day. I don't know.
So this is probably a totally different perspective, but. So when I had my first child, Haddon, we were living in Honduras.
Go ahead.
We had been living in Honduras for a couple of years, and I still felt like an outcast. I was a minority, in Honduran society, right? I'm a gringo. Didn't speak very good Spanish or English, but definitely didn't speak good Spanish. And so I just felt like, I really felt like an alien in the land. Like, who is this person? I didn't feel like I fit. Well, we had our first son in Honduras, and I remember once he came along, my mindset totally changed, because people were, instead of being like, oh, here's the gringo, how can I, some people, how can I take advantage of him? Or, oh, here's this, performance monkey that has white skin, why is he here? Instead of being a novelty, I became a dad. And I was invited into their cultural understanding of children and fatherhood.
That's pretty cool.
And the fatherless statistics are 10 times worse in Honduras. And so to see me holding and loving my child, and it was shocking to a lot of my students who had very little to no relationship with their dad. And so I was invited into this view of who I was now. And I just remember totally thinking like, man, this is like crazy. You know, I'm like, they look at me like a dad. I mean, I am a dad, but like I was a new dad. You know, I remember when the first time we took Haddon on campus and the students were just like, you know, he's there, let me hold your son. And I'm like, yeah, I'm holding my son. You know, you probably got, you know, what's that? Not monkeypox. Anyway, sorry.
Monkeypox.
Whatever the bird flu or whatever it was.
Swine?
Yeah, swine flu. One of those. I don't know. They all made their rounds. But you know, I just remember being brought. It's almost like I was welcomed into this like club. You know what I mean? And it's like it didn't matter at that point that I was, you know, the outcast gringo guy who didn't fit in society. It's like, you're a dad now. Like, you know, and a lot of the dads that worked on campus with us, like they would talk to me more and ask me about Haddon. And so it was really cool. Like I was a part of something that I hadn't been before, you know?
What kind of, like, for me, like my first kid is a girl. So like what kind of headspace did you put yourself in, like knowing like your first one was a boy? Because like mine completely changed.
Yeah.
Like when they said like, oh, you're having a girl, like I grew up with all boy cousins and you know I've got two brothers, so like I didn't know anything about raising a girl or what that was like. So like I've seen the beginning stages of raising a boy. I've got a 3-year-old boy, but like what kind of mindset did you have going in, like as a first time father, like, oh, I'm having a boy, like did that change anything?
That's a good question.
I know, that's why I asked it.
I think I approached it like this kid's gonna be a beast. That's how I approached it, I guess. Like I started like running through the list of all the things that I had learned from all the excellent men in my life, you know, my dad being one of them, but you know, my granddad, you know, some dudes at church, like these guys that have really impacted my life. And I'm like, oh, I'm teaching him that. I'm teaching him that. I'm going to teach him how to fish. I'm going to teach him how to dismember an animal once he kills it in the woods. I'm going to teach him how to build a firearm. I'm going to teach him how to love fiercely, you know, like fiercely in the sense of like, I'm going to show him what real love looks like. And honestly, him being a boy really for me cemented my role as a husband in my own mind.
It's cemented.
Yeah,
you said cemented. And it was just. I'm sorry. Like,
cemented.
You emphasized the wrong part of the word.
I don't know. I was with you on that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't.
Like it helped me be. It helped me live into my husband role better. I think him being a boy. Because it was like he's gonna model me, and I knew that going into it. He's gonna model my behavior, and so he's got to see me die to myself and live for the good of my family and good of my wife, and he's gonna see that. And I've failed at times, you know, and I feel like I've hit it on the nail sometimes, and I've failed sometimes, but that mindset was very different than when Lila came along, for sure.
Yeah, so like having a girl has like softened my heart a ton. Like early on, I didn't know what they liked. I didn't know, like, I mean, they weren't super frilly with like, you know, tea parties and things like that. But I mean, they played dress up, and they come out like, you know, Daddy, how do I look? And I'm like, I don't know what you have on. We're going through the struggle right now, and it may seem dumb to some people, but like my 9-year-old's like, Daddy, can I wear a 2-piece bathing suit this summer around my friends? And I was like, I didn't know this would, you know, I was going to have to make this decision. And like that I would care so much about making this decision.
Right.
But like those are things that come along with like girl like territory that I had no idea. Yeah. And nor did I know I would feel that strongly for or against certain things. Yeah.
I feel like boys, I don't know if y'all would agree, but it seems to me that boys are a little bit more straightforward in like the approach, or simpler in that you just kind of instinctually know, whereas like a girl, there's a lot more learning and a lot more like adapting.
I would agree with that, but I think there's a lot more stigma around women in society, and I think that plays into it. You know, stuff like that, like Lila had gotten to the point where she was outgrowing dresses. And so I just had to make the call. Like, if you're going to wear a dress, you're wearing shorts or leggings underneath. And, all my friends don't. I'm like, well, you're not your friends. You're my daughter. And we're going to set good patterns now. Yeah. And now it's not an issue. But, she would wear dresses that were too short because she had outgrown them. Yeah. And she didn't understand it. But I think my view about her wearing stuff like that is very different than my view about Haddon, right? Because societal stigma about young girls and, girls growing up is just very different. Girls are sexualized at such a young age, and it's just how society is. And we've as dads, we've got to protect against that, in a way that's not, it's your fault for, that person who looked at you the wrong way. Like, that's not what I mean. I just mean we've got to be wise about it,
Yeah. I know it's triggering to a lot of people, but I think there's a certain element of wisdom to the whole, if you walk into a bar with like, I'm not even gonna go down this road. I decided I don't want to. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous.
Too many landmines.
But ultimately, the lesson to be learned is, like, you have to. It's a balance.
Yeah.
Women are not responsible for the way men see them.
Right.
But we live in a society.
Yeah.
So
you got to know.
You got to be cautious. Dude.
You got to know the games people are playing,
yeah.
And you can't. I mean, Scripture says you got to be wise as a serpent, and was it gentle as a dove, and that for my daughter, that's kind of been my prayer, is that she's not dumb.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do. This is kind of a side note, but I think it's relevant. So she's seen me wrestle with my son. And so she grew up with this model of me and Haddon wrestling, and I'm really rough. I think that the value of him coming to the point of fearing for his life is so good for his growth as a person. He's got to know that I could wreck him.
Like, that Krav Maga.
I know. And I'll say, dude, get your Krav Maga, and he'll get his hands up. And, and now I'm teaching Booker, and he's like this. He's like, let's go. But he needs to be able to understand the consequences of a physical altercation. So, but this is how I'm thinking about with Haddon. I didn't go that route with Lila, but she saw it. And so then I was like, I remember after about a year and a half, I was like, man, I need to bring her into this. Like, she needs to learn this too. Yeah. So I started wrestling with her really rough. And I taught her that anytime I'm like coming over the top of her, to roll back and start kicking really hard with her legs. And so her brother will come at her and she'll just, mule kick him off of her. And it's like, because I'm not going to let her, oh no, I'm a weak, helpless woman. Yeah. No, you're not a weak, helpless woman. You've been told by society you're worthless and you're objectified. Mm-hmm. You are a powerful princess of the king. Like if somebody's doing something to you, you have full permission to bust their nose. And so it's really funny because it's kind of turned against me now, because I'll get to tickling her and messing with her, and I'm like not coming at her, but she's like, yeah. I'm like, whoa, like tone your legs down there, girl. Anyway, that was a side.
That's
kind of a
so
side
beautiful.
trail.
It's beautiful. Well, let's see. We've been going on for already an hour.
Wow.
You love to see it.
It doesn't even feel that long. But I suppose I don't want to bring it up short too soon, but I suppose we got to start winding down because it's almost 6 here. Really?
So I did want to bring up.
Yeah.
I'll jump in here. This is a segue. So I'm studying through the book of Colossians right now for a little short preaching series I'm going to be doing. And, I was thinking about our discussion about fatherhood and stuff. Yeah. And in the book of Colossians, chapter 3, I'm not going to go too deep into the context of the letter, because I'll just get lost in it because it's really cool. But it's relevant. So if you don't know anything about the book of Colossians, go back and read it. Starting in verse 1, just read it and let it hit you. But when you get to verse 3, it's almost like, chapter 3, it's almost like the consequence of all the things he's already written about. The bigness of Christ, we'll just say. The consequence of all of that, the consequence of our changed life, leads into verse 18, where he kind of gives, the subheading is rules for Christian households, which is really kind of boring and lame sounding, but I think it's relevant. So he says, starting in verse 18, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, which is like workers, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive an inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. I bring that up because as I'm studying through this and I was thinking about our conversation, I tend to be harsh as a dad. And I think in that I am not always providing the best picture of love. And when I use that word love, I use it in the biblical sense, like the way God has loved us through Christ. And I think about the way Christ has treated me in my life. Even in the midst of my sin, he wasn't harsh with me. When I would do things that I know are wrong, he doesn't deal with me harshly. He deals with me softly. And I think as husbands, it's easy for us, and we've talked about this already, it's easy for us to provide that dominant side, to provide that this is how you conquer, this is how you protect, this is how you defend, and when we need to do that. But I've also been reminded and encouraged by this letter of Colossians not to provoke my children, not to be harsh with my children. I love my dad, and I miss him. He died too young, but he was harsh. He was a harsh man because life had just made him that way. He lived a really, really tough life. He had a really, really harsh dad, and the horror stories he told me made me never want to be like that man. But back to what you were saying about staring into the abyss, we've got to know the depths of our capability of evil to be able to wake up in the morning and say, I am not going to snap that little 5-year-old's head off. I'm not going to yell at him for doing the same thing he just got in trouble for. Because that's my tendency, right? Like, I told you this already, the classic like dad thing. But I needed that. I need that reminder every day, and I needed it today. Again, not to be harsh with our women and with our children, but to love them and to live with them in an understanding way, which is a way that it says it another place in Scripture. So I just wanted to give that to your listeners and to you guys. Figure out what that looks like in your own life. But
see, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Sam and I are in the same Bible study on Wednesdays. I thought he asked a really good question because of that group, you're by far the youngest, I think. And then I think I'm the second youngest. So he asked, what advice would you give to a young father? And one of the guy's answers, it was great. It was patience. And he spoke more into that. He was talking about being a harsh dad, and this guy seems like a very soft person. From what I've seen in this group, he's just very nice guy. Always has great opinions, but he said when he was raising his daughters, he had that same thought of you're gonna be beast. You're gonna be self-sufficient, all that.
Yeah.
And with that came harshness.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was such a simple word.
Yeah.
But him looking back, I want to say he's probably mid-50s to 60. Just of everything he could have said, it was patience. Because I have the same tendency you do, where it's, it may not even be about the kids.
Yeah.
It may be about what you said, buying, tires for the truck or making bills, whatever it is. But that patience is something that, in my brain chemistry you brought up earlier, that's one of the things that fatherhood's starting to teach me.
Yeah.
Probably better than any other lesson I've learned.
Yeah. That's good.
And I think we have to pray for peace that passes understanding. And it's such an overused verse, at least in my childhood. We need to seek for peace that passes understanding. But there's been a few key points in my life where I've fallen just humbly before God. And I've said, I don't got it.
Yeah.
Can you give me peace that I cannot comprehend? And then in those moments, it all goes away. And I think that's how you kind of unlock that gentle side.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments of rage and frustration and anger, I just need something that passes my own understanding.
Yeah.
And that reaches to the core of me. And the picture that comes to my mind, because I think that's beautiful, Morgan, and the thing that comes to my mind is kind of what Jesus endured with absolute patience. The beatings, the ridicules, the cross. And he bore under all of that in silence, willingly, with absolute certainty of mission.
Yes.
And isn't that where we should be? We should be mimicking his life. He came down so that his life is a blueprint. So then as we bear up under our own version of the lashings and the whipping and the ridicule and the crucifix of our lives, like, should we not bear under that quietly, silently, with humility? And then what does that then, by example, teach your child?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned your grandfather was a harsh man, and then your father was a harsh man, and now you struggle with harshness.
Yeah.
So can you break that cycle,
Right.
where your son will struggle with something,
Oh yeah.
but maybe it won't be harshness.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something you can break,
Yeah.
and you can bear under the whippings of life silently, with humility, and then maybe he'll struggle with something else. But
I think, like, I was talking to my dad this morning, and I never knew my grandfather, but he seemed like a very nice guy, funny guy. But, like, one thing he wasn't was, like, over affectionate, and I think a lot of that was generational.
Mm-hmm.
So in turn, my dad's very affectionate. My dad is, first one to tell me he's proud of me, first one to hug me, and he one of the things that he told me a few months ago was, since his dad passed away when my dad was in college. So, I mean, I think my grandfather was like 45 or something like that. Like, my dad said with, like, tears in his eyes about, like, how he never got to the point where him and his dad became friends. Whereas, like, me and my dad are friends now.
Yeah.
Like, I specifically remember as a teenager, my dad putting his finger in my chest and telling me, like, listen, I'm not your buddy. I'm not your friend. I'm your father. You will respect me. It broke my heart. Like, more ashamed than, like, anything. I was just, like, I was hurt. To where now, like, because time has passed on, I've grown.
Yeah.
Like, we could become friends now.
Yeah.
I can give him advice.
Yeah.
He can give me advice.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see that change from generation to generation, because he wasn't like, what, my dad was like this. My dad, wouldn't tell me his feelings. He wouldn't talk about his feelings. So, I'm fine. Like, I'm not going to give you that. But in turn, he flipped it on his head. He's like, you know what? I wanted that as a kid. So I'm going to freely give that to you. Like, whether, like, you need it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's awesome. One of the things I say about me and Strider is, I tell him all the time, like, and he's 8 months, so he's just, huh? But I say, like, hey, we're gonna conquer the world together, my boy. And my thought is, this is someone who, out of everyone in the world, this is someone who's worth me giving everything towards and rallying around any cause they may have. Whatever he's passionate about, whatever he decides to pursue, that I'm going to become passionate about. That's what I'm going to pursue. And it just kind of, in my mind, it just kind of ties into what you were saying, Jordan, just the importance of the parent to actually lean into that friend side. And of course, with all balance, and there's stages of relationship, but it's vital that at some stage you begin to transition to become less of a parent and more of a friend and an ally. Because the problem is, if you're, and whatever age we may disagree, but my personal opinion at my young stage in fatherhood is, as my son becomes a teenager, I'm going to start transitioning to be his friend. And I want him to understand that when he fails, because he will, I should be the first person he comes to.
Yeah, that's right.
Run to me. Fall into my, you get a girl pregnant, come tell me. Don't be ashamed. Let's figure it out. Let's admit our wrongs, and then let's come up with a plan to build past this. You want to try weed? All right, let's do it together. Let's go buy some. Let's sit down in our basement. Let's smoke weed together, and then you can have this
Fun dad over
experience.
here.
But then I would rather him say, hey, Dad, like my friends are, because what you do is, I think if you create that environment as a father or as a parent, then you take away the allure of rebellion
Or being cool.
That's right.
Right, because then it's we're gonna go get drunk and we're gonna go drink, and it's, I've already tried alcohol. It's not really that great.
Yeah.
My dad gave me a Mike's Hard.
and we just got
He
toasted.
made me take 5 shots.
And
Sorry.
and no,
Just my dad, I guess.
So, and I don't know, maybe that's not sound wisdom, and maybe that's young fatherhood, not. And if y'all have anything you want to speak into on that,
No,
I would
I think
love
there
to
is
share,
some wisdom there, and you'll navigate that as they get older.
Yeah.
Like Haddon is getting into different things now, and I'm able to, like he was into Pokemon cards, right? And so like he just had them in these folders, and he was like, oh, look at this Pokemon, but he didn't know anything about the game.
Yeah.
Well, for Christmas we got this game. It's like teaches you how to play the Pokemon card game because we didn't know how to play, and so we started playing that, and we started playing Magic the Gathering together, and seeing him in a different light, like doing things with him that are not like dad things. I'm just playing a game with him. I could be one of his bros in that moment, and doing that with him, it's really opening my eyes to kind of what you're saying, is there comes a point when you do transition. And I never got there with my dad, but I started to kind of get there, but then I'm an idiot and I messed up my life, but there comes a point when you do start to, extend the hand of friendship a little more, because that's what the Father does with us, right? I remember when I first started following Christ, it was very much like I felt like the infant, and I often still feel like an infant, but the infant needs to be spoon fed. The infant needs milk from the breast, but once you get to the point in your relationship with the Father where it's like, hey man, I'm having a cruddy day, like, let's talk about this. It's a different level of a relationship. So I think you're right.
And I think one of the things that strikes me is the how God like allows us to lead, if that makes sense. And then he follows our lead, whether it's for good or for bad.
Yeah.
And then he teaches and loves based off of that lead. And I hope y'all find this as encouraging as I did, because in my mind, I tremble in fear at not giving my son enough time because so many things demand my time. And selfishly, I fight for things that I'm passionate about within trying to give him everything he needs. And I came across this statistic, and it said if you have 15 minutes of playtime with your kid per a day, of where you allow them to lead, and you sit in the playtime and they control the environment of play.
Yeah.
If it's a minimum of 15 minutes, then that will astronomically change the way they see you as a parent, change the way you interact with them. And I've started to do this with Strider, as silly as it is because he's so young. But I'll plop him down on the floor and I'll kind of fan on all of his toys. And rather than me bring things to him, I'm trying to imprint it on my mind early so that when he's older, it's instinctual. But it's, what do you gravitate to, my boy?
Yeah.
You're interested in the yellow block today? So am I. Isn't this a fascinating block? And I try and dive into just that simple mind of just what an interesting color. Like, isn't yellow so
it's my favorite color too.
Oh wow, this phone does taste good in my mouth as I chew on it, and it's just allowing me to be. He leads and he tells me, and I'm just here. You show me, my boy.
And that's one of the greatest joys I have as a dad. Haddon's like, hey, come build this Star Wars ship with me with the Legos. I'm like, sweet, let's do it.
Oh yeah.
I laid in the floor for like an hour the other day.
It's nice when you could start like gearing stuff. Like
Yeah.
my daughter's like, "Can I play the Switch?" And I'm like, "Yes,
And so will I.
yes."
Let's do some Mario Kart. You're going down.
I
Take
see.
that
I never
banana
played
peel.
video games as a kid, so one of the things I'm looking forward to is as Strider learns, I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So he'll probably destroy me from the beginning, and because at that point I'll be, 35 years of age or
You'll
so.
be, you might as well be
Just
in the
an
grave.
old,
Yeah.
just an old,
decrepit
man.
35
But
year old.
imagine learning video games at your all's age,
There's
Yeah.
no way.
right?
Yeah.
So I know I'm not.
I
Gonna
tried
be,
to learn fork knife and it was bad.
My mind's just gonna be just foggy, and I'm gonna be, how can I use these? So then he's gonna be,
In the metaverse.
7 years old, just
Yeah.
destroying, and I'm gonna be like, I can compete. So, that's beautiful. Well, is anyone sitting on attack? Any kind of last? I think we've covered a tremendous amount of ground. I'm very pleased with
Yeah, this has
everything.
been good.
Shout out to my two guests. Both y'all held it down. But I think I really want to shout out what I think was the unsung hero of this podcast.
Oh no.
And that's the camera. That thing
Oh, wow.
has just
It's still been going.
churning for almost an hour and a half, unfazed in the
Yeah.
face of
I didn't
everything.
notice.
And
wanna-
this is the first time the camera's done this.
Wow.
The first podcast that it's gone, it's always
Yeah.
stopped multiple times. So
I want to circle back real quick.
yeah,
This is the tack to what you started with from the very beginning, about how, reading books and things and taking advice, and it just didn't work for you. I think as a dad, we've got to be willing to put the work in for ourselves. There's not any quick answer. There's not a cookie cutter model. We can take wisdom from scripture, people we know, books we read. But at the end of the day, we've got to be in the trenches, and we got to do it, and we got to try. We got to fail, and we got to learn, and we got to do it again. And I think that for me, I'm glad you brought that up at the beginning, because it really reminded me that there's no quick answer to it. We've got to put in the work ourselves. So
That's great.
thank you so much for tuning into the Entrenched podcast. We'll see you all next time. Peace.